The experiential knowledge of human unconsciousness is like the viewing of a Seurat painting. So at the deepest level of unconsciousness, it would be like you're standing right in front of the painting with your eyes just a few inches from it, and you see nothing, you see only dots. But then you step out and you see an object, but you still can't see the whole painting. But you're aware of the dots and the object you've seen, and so it goes. You step out and get more and more of the painting. You understand what came before, but you still can't make out what's yet to be revealed. When a delusion is dispelled, it's a similar process, the recognition of it. When one was in the midst of delusion, one was unaware that one was deluded. But then when it's exposed, it can be seen in hindsight how one behaved when they were deluded. And by virtue of that, one can recognize when somebody else is acting out of delusion. An example of this that's relatable would be like if you saw somebody going absolutely out of their mind over something that wouldn't bother you in the slightest, all else being equal. Unconsciousness is revealed in the reaction to phenomena. And when somebody reacts far more strongly than you would, given the same circumstance, if you were in their shoes, you can know that there's something they hold in mind regarding this situation that makes them think it's more important than you think it is. This means you either don't have the full information or they are incorrect in their view. Perhaps you've already realized there's no danger, but they haven't. So like the old example would be the snake and the rope. You've seen the rope, you know it's a rope. They haven't seen the rope, but in the way it's positioned, it looks like a snake to them. And so you can see their delusion. So human unconsciousness manifests in the reactions to delusions. Another way in which it manifests is through the need to make things a certain way, or the need to have something or someone or some experience. It's just overall magnifier of neediness. So the delusion part of unconsciousness is related to fears for the scope of self and its possessions, be they inanimate or animate. And the needy part of unconsciousness comes from the unknowing separation from source by virtue of the zero-sum nature of attention. Attention given over to alternatives to this moment preclude the full scope of perception of this moment. I wrote something in a book that I published and unpublished in 2016 about the experience of time, and I think subsequent to that, this has been written about. But the experiencing of this moment is the experiencing of real time, not imaginary time. And so if attention can be given to either this moment or a memory or idea of the future, then the fraction of attention given to those imaginary things, the complement of that would be the amount of time you experience. And so when you're a child, you just haven't accumulated that mental playground of past and future too much. You have the future to think about, but your ability to conceptualize the future is dependent upon tools that you will learn. So there's this period of time before you have all these tools to plan out a future and such, that you're just a bit more present as a child than you are as an adult. So you're experiencing more time, literally. You're taking in more experiences. You're also more geared to receive it because the child has high neuroplasticity. The spiritual journey has been described as a trip from child to adult and back to child. Not every life is going to entail that journey, but when it does, the second child has the benefit of hindsight. The amnesia of states has been lifted. They have made the connection between presence and peace and their relationship to ignorance. It's easier to know there's a connection between presence and peace, as it can be experienced without a permanent shift in the way that reality is experienced. In such, the presence and therefore the peace that's allowed by it is temporary. It's dependent upon conditions, and to the extent that there is impermanence, all conditions are temporary. So there can be peace when the ideal conditions warrant it, but so long as there's identification with thought and form, there's the potential to react in regretful ways. And in the same identification, there's also the potential for a neediness due to an inner lack of unknown origin that's caused by a disconnection from truth. There was an incident described in the New Testament where Jesus makes it clear that a sinful thought is equal to a sinful action. Thought precedes action. To the extent that an idea is a departure from what's being expressed in this moment, it resists truth. So when two people see the same physical event but can't agree on what actually happened, it's because they see reality through different lenses of conditioning. Neither one of them are in alignment with the truth, possibly. Exposure to the palpable truth reveals itself to be the product of stillness. And there is no stillness like the stillness that comes with the lack of identification with the relational agent I. When the I is surrendered back to its source, the spiritual heart from which it arose, there's a stillness from a lack of relational thinking. There are objects, but there's no subject to relate to them. Therefore, there's no emotional movement. And yet, there is no naivete that's injected into the being. This is not the power of positive thinking. There is an even clearer understanding of the nature of human unconsciousness by virtue of having experienced multiple levels of it. In hindsight of such, one can get a sense of how dangerous a person they may have been, and therefore recognize how dangerous people can be based on their behavior. People are capable of anything, really. But aside from cases of physiological issues, evil deeds can be traced back to a voice in the head and uncontrollable mental images. It is therefore easy enough to interpolate based on the acts that a person commits what was going on inside their head. The closest thing to being able to read minds is to be able to observe from absolute stillness. No reaction, no impressions, no preconceived notions, no I, no nothing to relate, but to listen and watch a person. Much of what they say reveals what they think you think, but they are wrong because you don't think anything at all. So they are never telling you what you think. They are only ever telling you what they think. And that should seem obvious, but when you actually are thinking the things that they suggest you are, or perhaps even some variation thereof, there is a need to dispute that. And because you are thinking those things or some variation of them, you believe they are basing their thoughts on some real observation and not delusion. But when you're thinking nothing at all, everything that comes from their mouth regarding what you might be thinking is based on their own delusions. I talked recently about war being like a fire and how the person who starts it thinks they can control it, but then it just can get away from them. If I didn't say it then, I'd be saying it now. I don't know when the people who experienced world wars realized what they were in, but nothing happens in a vacuum. Things affect other things. Back when the Korean War happened, the Korean conflict, the United States pushed the North Koreans back so far that the Chinese intervened. And they had a reason. They did not want this on their border. So for their own security interests, they pushed back against it. I can't say for certain what's going to happen, but when major powers are in trouble, their overthrow can cause a massive shift in power that brings trouble to the doorsteps of other powers who have an interest in preventing that from happening. So it just seems like everybody is doubling down. Additionally, and this is not to impugn any particular generation, because I just think we are on an inclining of human unconsciousness over time due to the acceleration of informational intake, this massive accumulation of content between our ears is further removing us from the truth that gives us the contentment to not feel the need to rule the world. Every generation born into this time of accelerating information technology is at the cutting edge of human unconsciousness. There is an entire world of events going on that they're witnessing is like an emotional buzzsaw for even an unconnected party to see things happen to other human beings. It's going on all the time, and it always has been, but your ability to touch it didn't exist in the way that it does now. And so without guarding the senses, there just accumulates more and more mental content, the engagement of attention with which precludes the perception of the palpable truth and creates a neediness. So the generation that's in power now was in its day the most narcissistic. And as their season of power comes to an end, they seek to unfold all their plans. It feels like we're at the end of The Godfather, where everybody gets whacked. Speaking of which, I also spoke recently about how people will kill over their worldview. And certainly we've seen another example of that in political violence in the US. There's something particularly unconscious about people who feel the need to kill those with whom they disagree. It's like their way of solving problems in the world is just to cull the population, the parts that they don't like. Well, this disposition can be conditioned into a person, this kind of tribalism, the dehumanization of others. It occurs within the human heart through a searing, a dedication to the idol of self that needs overlap to feel safe. In this view, there are definitely good guys and bad guys. But for sure, the bad guys don't think of themselves as the bad guys. Nobody thinks of themselves as the bad guys. That's not to say there isn't belligerence in the world, but people justify their actions. This idea of killing the other is not only in the human heart, but it is codified in words. It's good to know whose hearts are ruled by such ideas.